Hi there, and welcome to another interview. Today, I've got a fabulous scientist with me called Claire, who is also somebody that eats carnivore. So, Claire, the reason I've asked you on is because you're a bit of a specialist. So, I'd love to know your history, your academic history before we start.
Thank you so much for having me. So I grew up in Canada and I was a horrible student in high school. But then when I went to undergraduate at McGill University, I absolutely caught the bug in biology class. I thought it was so cool that we could use modern technology to try to understand the complexities of nature. And studying through my undergraduate, I realized I was really interested in the origins of things. So I wanted to study stem cells that gave rise to the human embryo for my PhD. And I was lucky to have been awarded a full scholarship at the University of Oxford to do this. And furthermore, I think my approach to all of this was just from a very curious perspective. And I approached my interview in that way, that I really wanted to address the root cause. I wanted to understand what was upstream leading to all the development in life. So I was very appreciative that Oxford recognized that genuine excitement and awarded me a full scholarship for doing that. So I studied stem cell biology for my PhD. And then afterwards, I was interested in applying this knowledge to a more clinical field, a clinical application. And so I next went on to try to model infertility in a dish. And interestingly, this was all work I was doing in the UK. And while I was doing that, so what we know is that it is notoriously difficult to make sperm and egg in a dish. And what I found was actually, in order to do that, I had to work with things like mTOR, which is nutrient sensing. Apologies if I go into too much detail. I'll try to explain all of them. So mTOR is actually balancing mTOR and autophagy, which I will go into more detail later, can actually massively remodel the DNA and be able to more likely make sperm and egg in a dish. So I did a bit of that. And then finally, before going into the longevity field, I thought, I did all of this biology, all of this school and technology. What's the point? I thought the point was to be able to help people. So I wanted to go into something that is more clinically relevant. And that led me to study the environmental triggers for Alzheimer's disease and how we could help patients there. And so throughout that whole process, I had realized that a lot of my mentors from the stem cell field actually started working in longevity. So there's a huge longevity company that is funded by Amazon, Jeff Bezos. And then there's this other one that is founded by the head of ChatGPT. And the other one is the one that I work in. So that is how I got to where I am now in the longevity field. And when I entered the longevity field, I made one promise to myself. I'm like, it doesn't matter how smart I am. I need to walk the walk. I need to be healthy myself. And I was listening to a lot of Dr. Anthony Chaffee and Dr. Robert Kiltz, and made a lot of sense to me. And when I did that in myself, I was like, wow, I experienced a lot of benefits. So I could potentially go into a bit of that in terms of how carnivore really helped me become much better version of myself.
Yeah, that's a really good potted history. So, you studied at Oxford and you got a PhD. Also, you mentioned in the chats we had online a little bit about Alzheimer's as well. Could you just touch on that study?
So that was looking at the environmental triggers for Alzheimer's disease, in which we treated rats with pesticides, very common pesticides, and they would develop Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease. So there is actually, Alzheimer's is incredibly environmental. And we were trying to look at also the role of vitamin D. And a lot of that was looking at the epigenome, which is not the DNA that you're born with, but how the DNA is structured, that is influenced by the environment. So there is so I can go into more on Alzheimer's relating to our current work now, because a lot of the longevity field is trying to as well address Alzheimer's, which is a age-related disease. And a lot of the efforts there are actually in targeting autophagy. So.
Right. Okay. So yes, you could probably geek out
Yeah.
But just for people that are new to this, because I get new viewers every single day, could you briefly explain what autophagy actually is?
So autophagy is the recycling of junk in the cell. So when you don't have, let's say when you don't have nutrients coming in, one of the applications of autophagy is the ability to get rid of some of the components of the cell that are no longer serving you and trying to recycle those components. So like proteins and fats, amino acids to build new material without any new material coming in. But it also helps with getting rid of all this junk. Like, let's say you have things that don't work anymore, like mitochondria that give you energy. If they don't work, we do want the ability to replenish that. And it is known that it has been seen that this happens better in young people. And as you get older, this function declines. But it is heavily adjustable with diet and lifestyle.
Brilliant. Okay. So, is autophagy happening all the time, or do you have to have no nutrients coming in for a set period of time before it kicks in?
So we do want it to, the thing is, we don't want it to happen all the time, but we do want it to happen when it is required. So there is a constant balance in which there's nutrient sensing. When there is nutrient sensing, this is a bit geeky, and I would heavily recommend Professor Ben Bickman, who is a great expert in this. But when there is nutrients coming in, there is not too much autophagy going on. And in cases such as a fast, that's when autophagy would kick in. But it's not like if you, so in a carnivore situation, we don't really spike insulin because we don't have a ton of sugar. So autophagy high insulin leads to low autophagy. So in carnivore, when there's low insulin, we would have more autophagy. But in carnivore, it's not like we're always undergoing autophagy, because autophagy means that we're breaking tissues down. And we don't always want to breaking cellular material down. We don't always want that. In the case of carnivore, we also increase things like insulin like growth factor, and that could lead to less autophagy. So the point is, we don't want autophagy to happen all the time, but the trend is that as we age, autophagy goes lower and lower, such that we do not get proper recycling and replenishment of faulty materials in our bodies.
Yeah, excellent. And I suppose at its most basic, if there's high levels of insulin, that's sort of indicating that there's plenty of nutrients in the system, because you need that insulin to be anabolic, to make things happen. You also snuck in a little other geeky thing, which was mTOR. Do you want to explain that in sort of basic language?
Yes. So mTOR senses growth factors that come in, such as proteins, and that then regulates. Actually, mTOR leads to building. mTOR actually also regulates autophagy. So it's all kind of related. And so these are some of the things indeed that the longevity community, and I will not really get into the supplements and things like that because I personally don't take any of that, but these are the things that longevity, like geeks want to try to target, because they want to bring mTOR down. When mTOR is low, autophagy can be high. So I would say, yes, I bring in mTOR, and there is also another thing that regulates sugar, the glucose pathways, that's called AMPK. These are all things that, are the main things of longevity pathways, and they all actually lead to regulate autophagy. So
there's a lot.
The final thing is the final effector that a lot of these, and I would just quickly, I guess I would briefly mention that this is why, so there was a wave of longevity companies that came about in 2020. And the reason why is that we kind of realize that we're now at a point where we understand enough about longevity biology, and that a lot of diseases of aging, like Alzheimer's, heart disease, etc., are driven by these aging mechanisms. And if we can target these things, such as autophagy, we can hopefully help with some of these age-related diseases.
Excellent. Yes, and it's good. We'll get into your work a little bit more, but I just want to know a little bit about you as a person as well, because as you said, there's not many people doing longevity and carnivore, which makes no sense because it seems to be the optimal nutrition. But you spent 10 years as a vegan before all this, I believe.
Yes, that was due to falling for very excellent marketing, I would have to say. You know, the whole lifestyle and the whole vibes and everything, and going to school in McGill University that in Canada and in the UK. It was at the time when I was in school there, it was extremely vegan forward. So it was also quite easy to be a vegan there. And that it was kind of fun in the beginning. I don't know. I may have experienced some health benefits in the beginning, but that quickly went downhill very, very fast, especially characterized by insomnia. That was the thing that I struggled with for almost the full 10 years. Just waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to sleep. And that then led to depression. I was lucky to have some of the best psychiatrists ever in Oxford, and that actually really helped. But that still did not help my poor health state, like no matter how much I talked about it. So so that was actually quite sad, because I do think that, like personally, I would really like to kind of have like maximal mental clarity and be able to realize some of this potential, because I find doing this stuff like the science like super fun. And if I don't have the energy and like the motivation to do it, it is quite as well depressing. So having vegan really ruined my life for a couple of years. I would listen to what Anthony had to say about carnivore, and I was like, and I really started that when I got this job in the longevity field. So
Yes. And when you were studying, did I know it's biochemistry and metabolism and that sort of thing. Did nutrition feature at all? I know you're talking about nutrients, but did they actually talk about the source of the nutrients?
not at all. And it is also insane to me that even now to this day, like at all the education and even in my current company, it's not really thought of as that important. Like I find that a lot of scientists and my colleagues are so caught up in the biology and the mechanisms, like the minutia details. But I also like to look at the observed reality. It's like if I'm following a lot of, to be honest, a lot of the longevity field is vegetarian or vegan. Some of the top, like Brian Johnson, for example, eats mostly plant-based. So if that to me, like, I'm like, okay, that's what they preach. But if that doesn't work for me, I need to kind of listen to what I see is the observed reality.
Yes. I mean, that's a big thing I'm into because, I mean, on a much smaller scale, I suppose, I've seen thousands and thousands of blood tests, but very often they don't relate to what I see in front of me. And
Yeah,
I'll have people with a perfect panel of bloods and I'll say, well, these are allegedly perfect. How do you feel? And they'll say awful. So that's the observed reality. The bloods are
exactly.
telling them that they're fine, but the doctors are telling them they're fine, but they're not.
Yeah,
Brian Johnson, I believe, has about 130 supplements a day, so I don't think his diet is really where I would want to go.
exactly.
Apparently, when he jumps up and down, he rattles. But anyway, let's have a look at so the 10 years vegan, then you went carnivore, which is fantastic. You're now talking about longevity.
Which
So
I would just say the fantastic part is just the sleep, because now I get 8 to 10 hours of sleep, and that is free therapy. Like that literally helped me get through all of like my biggest, the things that were causing me anxiety or depression, things that I was ruminating over. It's just all gone. So that really, like, I don't think anyone could have done that for me except for the carnivore diet.
yeah, I mean, it is amazing. The thing is, I suppose people are getting to the point now in millions where they realise this is a good way to eat, despite what the media want to push in their narrative.
Yeah.
Better sleep has obviously led on to less depression and brain fog, I suppose.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah,
especially, and one of the things that I had to do actually on my job now, because I started the longevity job 2 years ago. And then last year, there was a wave of layoffs. And I believe there might be more because being in San Francisco in Silicon Valley, you're the first to experience the new technology in AI. And that means AI is replacing a lot of jobs. Like, this is not a joke. This is happening for real. And I had realized actually last year that if I continued my job as a scientist, which I was trained in biology, that I would lose my job. So actually, in last year from Carnivore Clarity, I taught myself how to be an engineer, how to code. And a lot of our work right now in biotech is actually coding up robots to do the work of scientists. So that's kind of the new wave of how things are going.
Yeah. My run-ins with ChatGPT are legendary, and I always screen share when ChatGPT apologizes for misreading data. And I mean, time and time again, I've written a couple of books where I've included pages where I've actually interrogated ChatGPT and said, I don't agree with what you told me, and here's why. And then it just apologizes. I actually had it saying something like, I know it's supposed to sound like a human. Oops, I have pushed a narrative without the required data. So it's actually said that. So I think AI has a good place, but it's still driven by what you put into it, isn't it? I suppose it's analogous to what we just said about nutrients. Yeah. If you put in, it can only respond from the data that's going in. It's not making novel observations because it's still gathering that info. I mean, when Albert Einstein was asked about common sense, because some of his theories didn't seem to have common sense, and obviously, subsequently we've proven that some of what he said that didn't make much sense seemed to be true. He said common sense is still the collection of data, your own experiences for the first 18 years of your life. That's what your common sense is based on. But there is other types of common sense, and I think that's quite fascinating. But anyway, right. I've gone off the subject. Sorry, Claire. If you want to go into a little bit more about what you're doing now, then the therapies you're looking at, and how. I'm going to be a really blunt question here. How are you certain that this will improve someone's longevity?
So that's the thing, that all these longevity companies that were so excited to start in 2020 realized that we actually cannot, if we want to move forward, because being in biotech, we do need to make a therapy that goes through clinical trials. We cannot make a drug for longevity right now. That will not be FDA approved. So we must first target diseases of aging. But one of the things that I do like about the longevity field is that we're not targeting specific, like, let's say, specific mutations in specific cancers. We're targeting pathways like autophagy to treat Alzheimer's. And I think the fact that, like, for example, one of the therapies that we're developing now is indeed a drug to massively enhance autophagy to be delivered to the brain. And this is to be used in conjunction with keto metabolic therapy. So that, to me, really, reminds me of the carnivore diet. And even though more research is to be done, but there is already plenty of research in the keto diet space.
Are you able to talk a little bit more about that drug, or is it secret at the moment?
It is quite secret at the moment. It is the purpose of this drug is to enhance autophagy. I guess the point is, we enhance autophagy to treat Alzheimer's. That is cool. And we aim to have this, our first patient dose this year. So this is, stay tuned. This is coming in. But I think, although, like, I would say I'm kind of, like, personally, I'm a bit like anti-drug in that, like, for example, I would not take Ozempic. I would rather have a healthy diet for me personally. But for patients who do have a devastating condition, targeting these pathways could help. And I think it is quite, to me, it's quite promising that these pathways that we believe I believe that, like, carnivore diet helps due to the insulin, the huge influence of insulin on autophagy, that the pathway in the carnivore diet is also the very pathway that the longevity field is targeting to treat disease.
Yes, and I think that's the thing. I'm with you 100%. I don't really like drugs if we can do it with nutrition, but some of the people I see have got 30, 40 years of dysfunction. I can give you an example. This week somebody had bladder stones, and there were so many of them. Diet is not going to do it. in the time that you need. So surgery is, you can do non-invasive surgery, but not even in this case. This was a case of looks like surgery is the best option. And I hate saying it because, I prefer natural remedies, but sometimes we as an individual have done something to our body for too long where it's going to take too long to reverse that. So you do need an intervention, but that is always, like you say, not the best option. If you can get away from drugs, and you can do it via nutrition and other things, which we'll come on to, that'd be great. Because one of the things you wanted to talk about was female hormones in particular, and the carnivore diet's effect on female hormones. So go into that for me.
So that would be more specific. I think there's not too much that's known about that, except for the part where what we found in the longevity field is that the ovarian aging is done by very similar mechanisms as the rest of the body aging, which is, inability to repair and similarly sensing these pathways like mTOR and nutrient sensing. And what I found was super interesting is that patients of, for example, Dr. Ken Berry and Dr. Robert Kiltz, who adopted the carnivore or keto diet, they were becoming pregnant much later. And this is, even in the longevity field, that is quite impressive, because that's what we want to try to do, to try to increase the female reproductive health span. So the fact that by adjusting these nutritive signals,
Can I ask you a bit of a left field question then? Because the menopause, what is the purpose of the menopause?
Potentially, that's actually an interesting, that's an interesting, something with the evolution, like once, past a certain time, there's no more point for a female to reproduce or something like that. But yeah, that is, it's more of an evolutionary thing that,
I think, I think you're right. I think actually what happens after menopause is when it goes wrong for a person, like hot flushes and irritability and all those sort of things. I don't think that's because nature is wrong by giving a woman a menopausal phase. I think it's because we're not eating the right way. Yeah. Because I've seen people really reverse their menopausal symptoms, for want of a better word, by just changing their diet and seeing the hot flushes going away and seeing the irritability and the calmness return and all that sort of things. Right. I do like to cover what you've mentioned that you're interested in, because nothing beats a real conversation. This is a real conversation, not scripted. You also talk about things like spirituality and community, which seems to improve mitochondrial health.
Yes. I think before we go into that, I would just like to mention one more thing that we're working on. So a big thing that is being worked on in the longevity field is in targeting autophagy. And another main thing is inflammation. A lot of longevity companies are working on immune system of the body and the brain to try to enhance those, either with stem cells or trying to rejuvenate. And then the third thing is the rejuvenation. So what we are able to do now, so this might be beyond the carnivore diet. What we're able to do now is to take an adult cell and make it younger. And once it's younger, it can function better. And that is using, this was actually based on a Nobel Prize discovery in 2012 by a Japanese scientist who was able to take an adult cell and turn it into a stem cell. And we're now using this type of technology, not turning it all the way back to an embryo, but using a partial, a slight hit of these factors to try to make old cells younger. What has and this approach, the proof of concept of this approach is that scientist David Sinclair, who is a very famous longevity scientist, was able to has brought this in clinical trials where he's able to make blind people see again. So this is another kind of part of the longevity field that we're using these factors, and now more and more so using intelligent AI design to make them even better, to try to target things like hearing loss or specific, like arthritis. So we can reverse these conditions that previously were thought to be kind of irreversible with rejuvenation technology.
Wow, that's very interesting, especially for me. As you know, I don't know if you know, I'm hard of hearing. I wear hearing aids, I lip read, and all that.
Yeah.
So, how could I improve? What could I do to reverse my hearing loss? Then what?
Well, use this technology. No, I'm kidding. But this is, I guess, the technologies that would help with that are stem cell therapies or this rejuvenation. And this rejuvenation technology, what it really means, though, is that we're we're forcing the expression of certain genes, very select, specific genes, either real genes or ones that we've made with AI that are supposed to be even better. And those are supposed to turn on youthful programs in the cell to try to be able to replenish your hearing.
And is this something like a supplement? Is it or an injection, or is it something you have to visit a clinic to have done to you? What happens?
This would be a clinic. This would definitely be like more involved process. Yeah, like injection. So this is to look forward to in the future. But I would say, yeah, the longevity field is actually very much so focused on autophagy, which is why I was very interested in carnivore due to it really supporting that.
Yes.
And then the other part is this rejuvenation thing, which I'll briefly touch on. How it works is by the epigenome, which we have the genome, which is the DNA that we get, and that's responsible for 20% of our fate approximately in life. But the other 80% is regulated by the environment through the epigenome, and epi means above the genome. So this means that this is just how the DNA is kind of shaped in 3D space, and as you age, it becomes more and more disorganized. So a cell, let's say a skin cell, becomes less and less aware of what it is. But the good thing about the epigenome is that it is very much adaptable by the environment. So you can do something about it. And we can also use this in therapy by really modulating the epigenome. We can make an old cell younger. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is fascinating. So we're talking about sort of epigenetics there. So is this where your spirituality and community comes in as well? Is that part of it?
I believe so. And all of that relation to the mitochondria is all very like speculative. But in the time when I was vegan and I was very depressed, I was able to kind of at least overcome that through community. So I think this human connection and getting more energy, mitochondria give you energy. And somehow, like when you're in a community or if you're fueled properly, you get more energy. And that's all kind of through mitochondria that give you energy. So
yeah, and I mean, at its most basic, you do feel more mental clarity. Do you? Do you find it easier to think things through?
Definitely. And I'm also other than being a scientist, I'm also an artist. I'm a DJ, and I used to be a DJ because I was very inspired by the electronic music scene in Europe and the UK. It's world class. So I find that, yeah, having more mental clarity from carnivore really allows me to just tap into those creative flows a lot. It's absolutely next level. And that feels incredible because what I create then translates to community, and you see all these people kind of being moved by what I create from mental clarity. So that's
yeah. When you went carnivore, did you find friends and family, especially as you're sort of an academic, did you find everybody was anti what you were doing and thought you was
absolutely
crazy?
Everybody thought it was crazy, but I'm like, you know what? That's too bad, because at the end of the day, like I'm the one who needs to, who ends up like having insomnia. So I'm like, even if you think I'm crazy, that's okay. But I think over time, I think I kind of became a lot more productive, and like I learned a whole new skill, which is like becoming an engineer while being carnivore. So I think people saw the results and were like, okay, she's not completely like dying and she's not completely insane. Like things are actually going in a good direction. So I think the results speak for itself.
And has
And
anyone around you been influenced by you to sort of try it because you've seen such good results?
some of my colleagues, but I think they don't do it very properly in that I think one of the biggest mistakes on carnivore is not having enough fat. And then they'll struggle like with their hormones. Their hormones will tank and they will have low energy and stuff like that. So just because I don't know, for me it was just very easy to eat a ton of like steak and butter, girl. I'm like, I can do that. And I just did until I just listened to my body, essentially.
Yes. So Claire,
Yeah.
how old are you?
32 years old.
Wow. Well, you definitely don't look that age, and my hat goes off to you for going against the tide and actually trying carnivore, and especially in the space you're in, which is fascinating. Um, I'm 60, so I feel I look younger than when I was 50. So I think carnivore's helped me with that.
Yeah.
Is there anything sort of you'd like to finish with that you feel that we should cover?
Yeah, I think it's especially just like the looking young thing. Like yeah, it's that is the important thing. Like I do, yeah. So essentially, I do all this science, and the goal of my colleagues and everything is we want to make therapies. But I'm seeing all these great results in carnivore, and if I'm going with what I went into this field to help people, and I see that carnivore helps people. I really also want to put energy in that space and just try to spread the word and try to help people adopt this lifestyle. Because I do think like I cannot like argue with the results. Like the results speak for themselves. And I also think it's quite important. Like there's a lot of scientists, and we know a lot of things in like the biology, but I also really value doctors and health coaches like yourself, because you guys, like a lot of the research that we come up with are done in animals or insects. And we're not really sure, how it translates to humans. There's not actually that much autophagy data in humans, for example. So I think it is highly valuable when doctors see what happens in their real patients by applying principles like carnivore or fasting. It's super valuable because even though we have all the knowledge and all the papers, it's not the same as applying it to real humans. So
Yeah, and I loved your phrase about observed reality, because that is my big thing. And so many people have reversed kidney function from stage 5 and improved it incredibly. Got off literally, I would say I must know at least 1,000 people in the last 10 years that have reversed their type 2 diabetes, got off their diabetic drugs, and lowered their blood pressure, got off their blood pressure medication. So I see it every single week, these improvements in real people.
which is so important. And because like these longevity therapies, for example, they're going to take ages to get through clinical trials and everything. And I'm like, some people are suffering now. So what can we do to help them? And seeing like the story of Michaela Peterson for arthritis and all of these, I think I want to be part of helping people now as well. I think that's super important. That's something that, like my colleagues wouldn't necessarily think to do. But I think, if our goal is to help people, there are people now who need help, and they cannot wait for our therapy to take ages to come about. So what can we do now to help as many people as possible?
Yeah, I think the big thing, I mean, you just triggered something in my mind there when you mentioned Michaela Peterson. I mean, when she did her TED talk about her, our arthritis, how she had to have joints replaced, and how carnivore reversed that. That's the only TED talk that didn't go out. I mean, they tried to censor it, which is incredible. It's supposed to be science. It's a real story. It actually happened. She had everything to back it up, and the TEDx people didn't want to do it, didn't want to show it. So what we're doing is, putting your head above the parapet. And I think it's really great that you're doing it in an academic space, because that's what we need. We need more science and like you say, observed reality, real people being helped. And yes, right now, and exactly what I was saying about sometimes you need a quick intervention, because sometimes we just have to get involved and do as much as we can, and not maybe get the 100% result we want, but at least improve it. So yeah, I want to thank you for your time. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
I think just the main thing that what longevity therapy is doing is trying to improve the standard of care. And to me, it is very heartening that the longevity therapies are actually, reducing inflammation, increasing autophagy, and these are the things that are helped with carnivore. So let's do more carnivore, but also at the same time, I will work with my colleagues to improve the standard of care by targeting the same mechanisms as what is helped with carnivore. There we go.
It's brilliant.